Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Elite City Podcast. We are here once again with our friend Paul and Mr. Rick from Canada. What's going on, everybody?
Going good.
Yeah, nice. That was awesome. Awkward silence.
I'm in Canada, and I have less snow than both of you, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's only sleet here, so.
Oh, okay.
Paul's pretty buried.
Yeah, I'm in Wisconsin right now, and actually I'm in a closet because the kids are like struggling to go to sleep, and this is the only like soundproof area I have in the house. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm in like the back room of my basement, so that's not much better.
Yeah. And the dog is outside right now whimpering. So if you hear whimpering, because she can't be, she can't be separated from me at any point. So, yeah.
I just thought you were like so into the podcast that you're just gonna like freak out.
I love the podcast. It's the best.
Hey. Whoops. Awesome. It is the best.
We have a topic today. We have a good one.
Yes, we have the current state of AEW. So, who wants to go first?
You're prepared. You have notes and stuff. I wrote this down. Like I scrolled it down on my phone like half an hour ago. So you go ahead.
All right. Well, from what we've seen here in the recent weeks, they've really upped the game in the women's division. I think that was priority number one on the to-do list for the back half of 2023 and moving forward. And they have already signed Diana. Is it Purrazzo or Purrazzo? I always mess it up. Purrazzo. Okay. They just signed her. Apparently, Mercedes, who I always claim is going to be there every week, is apparently signed. It's just a matter of time.
Mercedes is coming. Don't worry. One day we'll be right. One day you say it and it'll happen. Of course, it could never happen. But
right.
We'll see.
But if I keep saying it, it happens sometime. I'll be right.
So, not to go too far off topic. What happens first? Mercedes shows up on Dynamite, or Cody beats Roman Reigns?
Cody ain't ever beaten Roman Reigns. So me showing up on Dynamite might happen before Cody beats Roman Reigns.
When are they coming back to Milwaukee? Because I'll be on Dynamite that evening, so that'll beat everybody.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. I agree with you on the women's division. It's also like, how could you not improve the booking of the women's division based on what they've did previous to this?
True.
Like it wasn't good.
But
I agree that they're trying to make an effort now, and it's better. It is. But it's weird that it wasn't for so long.
I agree, but I think their hand was kind of forced with, people like Sky Blue and Julia like got real good real quick, and you don't want to like sit on people and be like, no, it's not your time. Well, then there's other places to work. They'll go, so their hand was kind of forced, and which is a good thing because competition, if they're if they're training and improving at that rate, then that's good for the division. So, but what do you guys think other than the things that I just said?
I mean, I was thinking about what you just mentioned, the competition. It is just overall good that like people have said this all over the place. Anyone who thinks that they want AEW gone or even wants WWE gone or TNA gone, like you're hurting wrestling as a whole. Like we're all old enough to know what it was like when there was, several viable companies and then when there was one viable company and how much worse that was. So like AEW's existence and hopefully success is important, I'd say, for wrestling, not to, over dramatize it, but I think it is. And I think that's part of the reason why people were upset when it seemed like they weren't like 2021 was like the time when AEW was like the closest to competition WWE's had in the last 20 years. And
absolutely.
And I think the fact that seemed like it wasn't the case for a while. That's why people got upset, maybe, because the vibe definitely changed. Like the vibe around AEW is a lot different from like
Yeah.
fans, from media, from like they were like the darling of the wrestling world for several years, and now they're not. And I was trying to figure out why that is exactly, and I can't quite figure out why that changed. But maybe you guys have an idea.
That's
I
interesting.
think, kind of building off what you just said, Rick, and I was thinking about my experience as a wrestling fan, right? That I still remember like the 1980s where there were 4 or 5 like outlets for watching wrestling that were pretty accessible. And then in the 2000s it became, well, it's one, and then if you want to watch TNA, okay, good on you. But it was never, no one, I don't think, ever really considered TNA in the same way as WCW to be a direct competitor to the WWE. And so I think when AEW started, I think for a lot of people, there was the sense of, we need to support this, right? Because what we have to have an irrational investment in this thing working, because I think we'd all like that sense of competition. We'd all like, for wrestlers, another viable option, right? That's not just Mexico or Japan or, playing in front of maybe 500 people in a Ring of Honor show. And and I'm not saying AEW hasn't had missteps, because I think every time I've been on the show, we've been talking about AEW's missteps.
Right.
So I wonder if there's like an element of like a hypercritical lens that I don't know existed in like early 1990s WCW, right? That everything that AEW does wrong gets magnified by 100-fold because of this weight we've put on this company, because we want competition. We want something other than 3 hours of Raw where it's like my middle schoolers talking smack to each other. It's dull, it's boring, and I don't like it.
Right.
So I sometimes wonder if it's just that, if it's just the bad booking of the women is magnified because we're so invested in this thing succeeding, right? Just as an example. And again, not saying AEW hasn't had its missteps, but I think it's that. I think it's just the sense of the wrong becomes magnified.
That makes a lot of sense, because
that makes a ton of sense.
When it showed up, you're just like, oh, this is the wrestling company that I've wanted for however long. And everything that you wanted about wrestling that you weren't getting out of WWE, you're like, oh, this company is going to give it to me. And for a while they were giving you everything you asked for, right? They were giving you Kenny Omega in North American matches. They were giving you, John Moxley getting to be John Moxley. They were giving you CM Punk, which people wanted for a long time. They were giving you everything, basically what you wanted from a wrestling company. Tony Khan was like, yeah, it's right here. Right. And eventually that's not reasonable, because not everybody wants the same thing from a wrestling company. And second of all, like, you can't continuously just, like, once you hit a level, you can't continuously be like, oh, we're going to give you more stuff, because there's only so much you can. It is just a wrestling show, right? You can't just keep giving more. Is it the internet as well, though? What I was thinking, like, because before, even in like late 90s WCW or mid 90s WWF, neither of them were particularly good. Like, if you were watching WWF in like 1994 or 5, it was not good. But like, what were you gonna do other than not watch it or like tell your friends, right? Like, what outlet was there for you to find out that, oh, everybody else hates this show too? Like, you just.
That's true.
Right now you can go online and you can say, I don't like what happened on Dynamite, and 10,000 other people are like, neither do I. And you're like, yeah, that's a thing now. And like, I don't know.
That's a great point, because as you were saying that, I was just thinking of me and my buddies, like the same group of us. Well, there was 5 of us. We rode the bus together from second grade until we started driving to school when we were 16. So every Tuesday during, middle school on, we talked about wrestling. So if it was so stale, like, I mean, it was hot then, obviously, but like if it would have got stale, we would have all just quit watching because that's what the group did. You know what I mean? But since the
Yeah.
whole group watched, we all watched. Like, it was weird.
Yeah.
That just dawned on me. That
Yeah.
is a very, just because there was no internet and all that, that was like our little bonding agent. And I mean, we're still lifelong friends, but that's just, we would have moved on, definitely. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Never thought of that.
I mean, that was my experience a bit too, right? Because let's see, like I would have entered high school in like 1993 or 1994.
Same.
And so like the wrestling bubble that 80s bubble had burst by that point. And I mean, I was still watching it, but it wasn't as like, again, like as Rick said, like it was bad. It was bad.
Oh,
in the
yeah.
early 90s, right? And you watch some of those shows from the WWE, especially during that time period. It's just, you don't even recognize the product. But I don't know that there was. But I think my experience is a little different because then ECW got big when I was, and that became the outlet for all my friends. Like that was the Renegade promotion. That was Philly, right? And so we felt an affinity to it because it's in our backyard, and so that drastically changed my experience because no matter how bad the product was in WCW or WWE, we had that third outlet. And I think in college, then the internet got big.
Yeah.
And then I saw there's a much bigger audience of this thing than I realized. But now, right, it's, if I see a crappy match between Ruby Soho and the small Japanese women wrestler that was trained by Kenny Omega, I can't think of her name, and I say, like, that's a crappy match, and I can go on Blue Sky and see like 5 other people saying the same thing, and there's immediacy to it that didn't exist before.
Is there also like a want, like a need to complain, like a enjoyment to complain? Like Paul and I, when the reason we first started talking about wrestling is because we were watching WWE, and like we've talked about this before, in like 2014, 2015, when it was absolute garbage.
Yeah.
And like
you were adults, you could have changed the channel.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not smart, right? But like, the thing you could do was you could make fun of it, right? Like you could go, hey, that was stupid, and you could make fun of it. And like, is the problem now WWE? I haven't seen much of it, but it apparently is pretty good. AEW, from what obviously we all enjoy it. Is there just nothing to complain about? So you're like, before there was just something obviously bad that you could complain about. Oh, Vince McMahon is terrible. We all have that to rally around. But now it's just like, oh, Triple H seems fine and AEW seems fine. So let's nitpick. But let's find a thing to complain about.
Well, that's what it is. It is nitpicking. Like, it's people complaining about, oh, well, they botched so many spots on not ECW, on AEW, excuse me. Well, yeah, look what you're doing. You get one shot in front of a live audience. Like,
right.
They always say it's not ballet. Well, ballet's also practiced for 10,000 hours. Like, this is like me and you talk 10 minutes before we go out. We go out on live television and do it. And you're not just doing like, basic holds. Like, you can slip, it's people nitpicking. Like, you have to realize that, people drop passes in the NFL, people miss empty nets in the NHL. Like, nobody gets, spat on for that.
Well, I think who needs to someone who needs to realize that is Tony Khan. Like, that it is just people on the internet.
Well,
because like, I mean, as funny as sometimes his like Twitter meltdowns are, and maybe he's doing it to draw attention to the product or whatever, but like, you don't need to be that extremely online. Like, you're not. There's a point where you're not helping anymore. Like, part of it is like, we're like they want to be like the Renegade brand that's like throwing stones at the king, but eventually it's just like, okay, you got like stop. You're like, what are you doing?
And I mean, I understand it's a different business, but like, you know, Tony Khan doesn't, you know, tweet out when they're playing the Steelers and like, oh, that Rooney family, they're a bunch of idiots up there.
Right.
Like, no.
Like I know he's doing it as like a wrestling
right.
thing. Yeah.
But at the same time, like everybody knows, like we're not children, dude. We're your age. Like we know you're just doing it. Just tweet out, this is a commercial for my other thing. Watch it, please. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
So Josh, you said like nitpicking.
Yes.
And I wonder, I'm thinking, this is not a fully formed thought, but I wonder if, in my experience now as a wrestling fan in his 40s, that even if I nitpick, and I realize you're totally right? You have 10 minutes to put a match together. Everyone is looking for the slip and the botch. And there's this whole economy online, right, of people that have made their careers on YouTube of pointing out botches, right? Yeah. And but I also wondered, like, I wonder too, just big picture, if like WWE, like, and Rick said this, like when he and I started becoming buddies, was like watching 2014 WWE and just making fun of it. But I remember like a lot of our conversations, Rick, were feeling just completely defeated because we didn't see any change whatsoever. Right. And I wonder if that's going back to like where we think AEW is compared to the WWE. Like the WWE has a great product for the WWE, but it doesn't really change. You know,
I think we said before, WWE makes like the best version of Monday Night Raw in 2024 that you could make.
Yeah.
But it's Monday Night Raw in 2024. It's not necessarily what you may want that to be. It's not the wrestling show that you may want to watch.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's not for me because I watched, like, when Punk came back, the entire 3-hour Raw. And I was just really shocked at what I was watching. Right? It just seemed like so vanilla and so, this isn't my wrestling. And I don't know. I guess I feel like no matter how much we nitpick or complain, like nothing has changed in either company recently. And I guess going back to, I want this company to succeed. And in the back of my mind always is, hey, remember WCW from 1997 to 2001? And I think it's that too. Those of us that were around for that time, you just saw like this company that was on its apex with the NWO. And then within 3-4 years, it's Scott Steiner versus...
It's Judy Bagwell on a pole at some point.
Yes.
I do feel that because, like, and I think WWE is trying to exploit that right now when they're, you know, Punk showing up or Jade showing up or Cody coming over. They're trying to exploit that feeling, being like, oh yeah, maybe that was hot for 2 years, but they're all coming here now. It's dying. Like they're pushing that narrative of the company that was really hot in 2021 it's over. Just like WCW died, just like ECW died, just like they all died. They will all die, and everyone will come over here. So just skip the drama and just come over here with them.
But do you think they're pushing it, or do you think we're pushing it? And maybe that's like a difference. Because when I watch WWE, there's no acknowledgement of AEW.
No, there's no acknowledgement of AEW at all. Though I feel like, I don't know, this just might be my narrative that I've created, and hear me out. NXT was the hot thing, especially before AEW showed up. Like NXT was what you know, certain wrestling fans, the wrestling fans who probably now watch AEW, the New Japan wrestling fans, the ROH wrestling fans, that's what they wanted from a company, was NXT. Right. Yeah. And they got NXT, and for a while NXT was the savior when there was no other companies. Yes, it was still WWE, but it wasn't. It was different. So you could latch on to that. Then AEW came out and they were like a legitimate alternative. It was the same sort of style, even some of the same people, but it was an actual separate company versus a WWE brand. And it crushed NXT pretty quickly when they put them head to head. My narrative that I've come up with, and I don't know how true this is that like WWE took that hard. I mean, that's when Triple H left for family reasons and Stephanie McMahon left for family reasons. And the thinking was Vince McMahon was like, well, you failed. You're not going to get to run a wrestling show anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then now he is again. And is this his chance to be like, no, I can, even if I'm not going to mention them on TV, I'm going to crush them. I'm going to say little things like, oh, Jade's not in the ring yet because, she wasn't trained properly. I'm just going to take little sly shots. I'm not going to explicitly say because AEW sucks because I don't want to even mention their name, but I'm going to say little things like, this is the big leagues. You're finally in the big leagues with us. Like, is that what he's doing? Because he knows the internet knows what he's talking about. And if you don't know what he's talking about, who cares?
Well, I agree with you. And Samoa Joe's promo, he said something during it that made so much sense. And Triple H, I don't know if he's saying that verbatim, that what you said, but that's definitely the mindset over there. When Joe cut that promo, he said, first off, I am nobody's property. When you sign, they make you wear that stupid shirt that says property of WWE. And you stand there with Triple H, like, and it's just stupid. Like, they own you. Yeah, they do. And then when they're done with you, they fire you. And Joe basically alluded to that. I mean, got fired twice in 1 year.
Yeah.
Triple H preaches that narrative to the people that don't matter. That's his quote unquote fans, the crowd. It matters to the people in the industry. Like Joe going backstage and being like, yeah, it sucks there. Like, you're under everybody's thumb. You have to ask to use the restroom. You have to, like, it's like being in a horrible job. Like, I don't know if that's really what it's like. But
I think we will all agree that, like, Triple H, at least personally, what we feel is Triple H is not the savior of pro wrestling.
Agreed.
That
he thinks he
to
is.
paint him as.
That he thinks he is.
He thinks he is, and that people who like him think he is. Right.
Right.
I mean, you hear, like, you spend 10 minutes online and you hear, like, how everyone praises him as like, oh, he's going to save wrestling. No, he might save WWE.
Right.
But he's not saving wrestling. He doesn't care. Like, if he could shut down every other company tomorrow, he would.
Totally.
Definitely. He has no interest at all at saving wrestling. He has interest in making WWE profitable, which is his job. So that's fine. But the people positioning him as anything other than a guy trying to run everyone else out of business, I think, are being naive.
True. And again, this is showing they just wanted to expand to Japan, and basically all the Japanese companies told them to go pound salt because they know you're shady. They're going to come over. You're going to start to steal talent. You're not going to honor your handshake agreement. But then again, look what Tony does. It's a business opportunity to him. He put together Forbidden Door, unreal. Like, everybody looks at WWE as they're like the Walmart. It's like, oh God, here they come. What are they going to steal from our town next?
Right.
And I think they have zero respect within the industry, actually, where it matters. Like, if you notice, now that AEW exists, a lot of the people from the indies don't end up in NXT. Like, NXT is signing like failed people that didn't get drafted to the NFL.
So then what is it? Because I mean, personally, I do feel that there's a difference in AEW. I don't know if it's what we've been talking about, that we just wanted it to be more successful than it is, or we want something different from it, or like, is it just that there's a lot of it right now? There's too much AEW. Like, there's too many wrestlers, there's too many shows, there's Collision, there's Rampage, there's Dynamite, there's ROH, there's extra pay-per-views. Is that the feeling different? Because it does feel different to me. Like, and I don't know why. And it's not that I don't enjoy the shows, because every week I enjoy the shows.
Right.
So it's not like I think I don't like the product. I do, but something feels different and I can't put my finger on it.
Well, I was just going to ask, what is your definition of success? I mean, they're on weekly television for, if you count Rampage, which nobody does, for 5 hours a week. Like, that's pretty successful in my eyes. I mean, ECW couldn't pay people to get them on television,
right?
And
I mean, in terms
AEW's
of
on
professional
national
wrestling companies other than WWE, this is roaringly successful. Yes.
But that's what I mean. Like, what are people's not, when I say I didn't mean yours personally, Rick. I'm sorry. Like,
No, I get it.
what are people's expectations? Do they want
I think
this company that's 2 years
it's
old?
I think it's the 2021 aspect of it, where like everybody showed up in AEW, and they were like, Jericho said something at that time like, "Oh, it won't be long till we pass Monday Night Raw," and like it was possible that Dynamite was getting 1.1 million people and Raw was getting 1.3, and you're like, oh, it could happen. Like they
It
could
still can.
realistically take them over.
They're only 5 years old. What was?
No, I agree.
Like,
it just I think the problem is that it got so hot so fast that
true.
now even a small dip, like it is a small dip. It's and they're still a very young company. But like what Paul was saying, is it in the back of everyone's mind that like, oh, that was the peak? That was, NWO in 1997, and the dip is not a dip. The dip is gonna keep going. Like, is that what everyone's worried about?
If there was a wrestler in charge, I'd be worried. But there's a businessman in charge, so I am worried.
I guess there's a businessman in charge, but I don't know. Like, I agree with Rick. Like, there's something missing, and whether that was this cohesion of the program, whether it was this sense of everyone's on the same page, or the sense of there's optimism with this program. Again, wrestling is narratives, right? It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's never. I shouldn't say it's never, but it's often never really about the reality. And I do think AEW has plenty of. I don't think AEW is on its death knell. Like, Shane McMahon's not going to show up on Collision anytime soon.
Damn
it. But I lost my train. It was a pretty good joke.
I'm sorry.
I mean, it would suck, but for like a brief second, it'd be really awesome, and then it would suck.
And then Wardlow would throw him off the top of a cliff, and then that'd be it. But no, like I don't think. Yeah, AEW is not WCW in 2001 for a variety of reasons, but I think
they're also not WCW in 1997 though, when they were like, no, you can't crush WWE right now. You can't. Like, it's impossible. They're too big.
And I don't think it's not possible. Like, there's not going to be a company anytime soon, if ever, that's going to give them the push that WCW did in 96, 97.
We were talking before we started recording. They sold for $9 billion. Like, they're competing with that it's competing with the NFL as a football league, right? Like, you can't.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, when I think right whenever Paul joined, like, Star Wars, a movie franchise, sold for only $4 billion. Like, think about that.
Yeah.
Like, Star Wars is a cash cow, and WWE sold for $5 billion more.
Yeah.
Unreal.
I mean, there was sort of the aspect of AEW caught lightning in a bottle, because during the COVID lockdowns 2020 time, they had Daly's Place first of all, and they did bond. They all kind of got together, being like, we're a new company. Where at that point they were like a year or so old, and they were like, we're all going to get together and we're going to keep doing this show, even if we have to like live in this arena and record 10 hours of TV in a row. We're going to do it. And they kind of all buckled down and like put on great shows. Like, those were, I mean, they're not great in the scope of all wrestling television, but in the scope of 2020 lockdown wrestling, great.
Yeah. It gave everybody a little bit of normalcy. It was wonderful.
So they had that, and then coming out of that, they got CM Punk and Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole, and then it was just like, oh, this company that like bonded together and made an identity during one of the worst times in recent history for society. Now look at them. Now they're getting CM Punk was never supposed to wrestle again, and they got him. They got Bryan Danielson, who main evented in WrestleMania, to walk over. This is going somewhere. And it's not realistic to think that they're going to pass WWE, but for a moment it felt like it, right? Like, it is that it? Is that the disappointment that like, oh, they're a good wrestling company, but they're not going to take on WWE because no one can.
Maybe this is just me being the forever optimist, but like, I feel absolutely none of this. I feel they're in like a perfect situation that, I mean, I don't want to say anything's personally. I don't feel anything's missing, like you guys, kinda. This is
It's
just
interesting because there's nothing that I can point to that's missing. Like I've said that before, like
right,
earlier.
right,
Like even if you compare like the 2019 roster to the current roster, like the current Dynamite roster or AEW roster is leaps and bounds not only over anything AEW has done before, but most wrestling companies. Like
right.
it's great. I don't know what it is though. Does it
That's
all? I mean, we have to bring it up. Does it stem from like the Punk stuff? Because there was this like cohesive underdog, we're all going to work together and reach this goal environment. And then the reason he went there was because Brody Lee got sick and no one said anything.
right.
And they were just so tight and so all working towards one goal. And then it was like, oh no, now Andrade is punching Sammy Guevara and Eddie Kingston's fighting someone. And oh, I think Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker hate each other. And it was just like, oh, now it's all, it felt like it was unraveling, even though the on-screen product was good.
For me, like I don't know if that was what pulled me away. And again, I'm a pessimist. I'm from Philadelphia. Like everything is negative at all times. But like watching the shows now, I think maybe it is nitpicking, but I think the sort of scrappy backstage musical aura AEW had initially, like we're all going to come together and put on a show. And that's overly simplistic, but I think that's part of the appeal for me during COVID was we're all hanging out in a football stadium. And these aren't like A-list wrestlers for the most part, but it was entertaining.
Right.
And it was, I have no evidence to back this up, but I do think that was part of the appeal for a lot of people. Like that's how they envision AEW. It's Jericho and MJF doing musical numbers. It's
and like Dark Order and yeah.
And then once they have all that positive momentum in 2021, then it becomes a wrestling company. And all the things that I think have jaded a lot of us about wrestling, like the negativity and the backstage stuff and
hiring Ric Flair.
Yeah. Oh God. And
that's so bad.
And being like basically like a Dark Side of the Ring episode every week. And so it's no longer the plucky underdog. It's a wrestling company. And maybe a dysfunctional one. And I don't know. I don't know where I'm going, but like I think that's part of it.
I think that is part of it. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit that like when Bryan Danielson and Punk and Adam Cole and everybody showed up, there started to get this feeling online of people being like, oh, what about Dark Order? What about Best Friends? What about the people who I liked watching, right? Like they're not on. And I mean, Tony Khan is not wrong. If you're going to put on a wrestling show and try to get the most viewers or the best product, you're going to put on Bryan Danielson, not Dark Order. No offense to Dark Order, but they're not Bryan Danielson.
Even Dark Order knows that.
Yeah. So no one's saying they made a mistake. I saw some people saying, oh, they made a mistake pushing, Punk and Danielson. Like, no, they clearly did not. Like maybe in retrospect, pushing Punk was a mistake, but at the time you would be silly if you had CM Punk on your roster. You're like, yeah, we're not going to put him on though, because we need more time for Chuck Taylor. Again, no offense to Chuck Taylor, but he's not CM Punk. Right. So, but that's when there started to be a bit of a split of like what about those guys? What about the people who got us here? Why aren't they getting more? And then that got exacerbated by the fallout between the Elite and CM Punk. Then people split. There was I loved the old AEW and I supported, those guys. And then these guys came in and wrecked everything. And whereas then there's the opposite who are like, no, I thought it was really cool when Punk and Danielson and all of them were there. And what do you mean that they're not anymore? Right. Like it started a rift when the fans used to be as close as the AEW locker room was, at least at the beginning. Like they were all kind of rallied behind this little ragtag group of misfits and Chris Jericho. And now the fans kind of split too into like, warring little groups. Like there's elite fans, there's ex WWE wrestler fans. There's like it's become a whole thing.
It's when you reminded me of something and with the fan base, and this is crazy that you said that. I'll never forget when I only saw Green Day one time. I saw them in a club in '93, I believe, maybe '94. I don't know. But there were like all these old school punks there. And I mean, I'm a little kid. I was there with my friends that were a little older than me, but they all had they made signs and they were said sellouts. I remember being terrified because that was like the old guard and they wouldn't even talk to us. But we were there under the banner of punk rock and Green Day.
Right.
But there was such a division in that crowd. Literally, I remember being scared. And it was why? I mean, you're all paying customers to see something that you like just because you liked them before I did. You know what I mean? That's that weird tribalism we talk about, and that the fan base has done that. I was here from the beginning.
Right.
You see that a lot. That's crazy. Wow. Sorry.
I think
off.
Paul was right. They're a wrestling company now, and I think I mean they've always been a wrestling company technically, right? But at the beginning, it was kind of like Cody and the Bucks and Kenny and their Jericho and their friends who you don't know. You had no idea who any of these other people were, and they all kind of oh wait, they got a TV deal. Oh, they're on pay-per-view. What? It was okay, I'm gonna rally behind this essentially 5 guys and their buddies. Whereas now it's a wrestling company.
I'll never forget when it was announced. Obviously, I followed the Bucks on Twitter and everything, and they were like, "Hey, tomorrow, you should maybe come onto Twitter around noon." And I was like, "Oh, okay. What are they going to tell us? New T-shirts coming out or something?" So I totally missed the announcement. Everyone's like, my phone starts blowing up. Did you see this? I was like, "What the hell's going on?" And then, oh my god, a new wrestling company exists. They played it really well. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And now they're a wrestling company, right? Especially even the Tony Khan aspect of it, right? He took over booking at some point when I think that Dark Order episode when they had a bunch of those creeper guys. I don't think I actually watched that episode. But
was that more the pulled punches?
Yeah.
And, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. The internet story, at least, I don't know that, when none of us are backstage, but the internet story at least was oh, that was so poorly received by the AEW audience that Tony Khan decided, oh, I have to do a more hands-on approach. He was previously letting each wrestler kind of book their own segments. So if the Elite were in a segment, they did their own stuff. And if Jericho was in a segment, he did his own stuff. Right. And at that point, Tony Khan was like, no, I have to basically write the shows. Which
and that
sense. It was right. Following that time, the TV got better. He was correct to do that. But now it's a wrestling company, right? Whereas before it was, Cody's going to write his own segment and Kenny's going to write his own segment and the Bucks going to write their own segment and just kind of put it together. And it is like an art project. And then now it's, oh, we have a head booker who owns the company. We have our own Vince McMahon, not the same personality, obviously.
Right,
Vince McMahon. He's the guy, right? Whereas before they didn't have that. They did, but he wasn't taking on that role.
Yeah. I'm thinking now too, is kind of every thread we have here, and I'm thinking about WCW and older wrestling companies. And I wonder too, I was thinking about, the fear of a lot of us is this is going to turn into WCW 2.0. And I was thinking, when Hogan and Savage came to WCW, the feeling among the fans was, oh God, these idiots from up north have come down. And the thing that WCW was eventually smart with, I mean, you had to convince Hogan to do this, but turn them heel, right? Make them part of this outside invading faction, which, is based on, thread, but whatever. But I was also thinking older wrestling, you're very used to guys showing up for a few months and then leaving. And there's not the same, the local guy is the Von Erichs in Dallas or, Junkyard Dog in Louisiana or Jerry Lawler in Memphis. You still had your main guy, but you were used to people coming and going to different territories and coming back 4 years later. And I think it's different now, right? That it's AEW guys versus WWE guys. And if you're pushing WWE guys like Punk, like Danielson, like Cole, like even Moxley to an extent, then you're hurting our company. And again, it's that tribalism. And the tribalism is so different and weird because it's basically two companies now. But one side of the fan base has, or one of those companies, the fan base has just like stuck themselves to this AEW flag. And it's hurting everything. It's hurting everybody, and it's hurting my brain. And
I mean, is it that we haven't seen this in a long time? Is that the problem? Like,
I think so.
Like, we're old enough to have seen it, but like, if
Right.
you're 10 years younger than us, or 15 years younger than us, like Bryan Danielson going to AEW or Cody going to WWE is insane, right? You didn't see Hogan leave. You didn't see all that stuff happen. So this is insane to you. Like, people changing companies just doesn't happen in modern wrestling as much as it did before.
And if it does, then it becomes like you're turning your back on this company or that company. And not to sound like an old head, but it wasn't the same. Like, it was, again, like the Monday Night Wars, it was kind of surprising. Like, oh my God, Rick Rude is now in WCW.
Right.
Lex Luger is on Nitro. What's going on here? Right. That's interesting and exciting, but we were very used to that 30 years ago. And I also blame the internet. It's the internet's fault.
It's always the internet's fault.
It's always the internet's fault.
But that's true because, like, I mean, obviously, if the internet existed the night that Rick Rude was on Raw and Nitro, we would have known that he quit WWE or WWF at the time, excuse me, after that taping. Like, it would have instantly been everywhere.
Yeah.
But we didn't know that. We're just watching one,
I remember my first experience reading wrestling stuff on the internet, and it was when Bret Hart was leaving. And I remember reading, Bret Hart was my favorite wrestler, and I remember reading Bret Hart was leaving. And that was the first time that I read something like that on the internet before it happened, and I knew about it. And B, it was the first time where I felt like personally hurt by something. Like, we didn't get it. WCW was harder to watch here. It wasn't on Monday nights. Like, you had to watch it like on a different time. It was a whole thing. But Bret Hart leaving was just like, oh, do I have to not watch Bret Hart anymore? It was weird. Like,
yeah.
And then it just became a thing, right? Then, once you're used to it, you're used to it. But that moment was like, oh no, I can't like Bret Hart anymore because he's going to the company that at the time WWF had, as they do, had done a great job telling me, who'd never seen WCW, that it was terrible and you shouldn't watch it. And that worked because I was a teenager, right? So is it just that people are experiencing that now for the first time? What I would have experienced in 1997, they're experiencing it now for the first time and they're hurt.
That could be. And, you've said a million things about how WWE always controls the narrative. Well, they do. They've always done that. I mean, you just told the Bret Hart story, so them telling, well, like I always say, when somebody either gets fired or leaves, what's the big thing coming out of WWE? Oh, they couldn't cut it here. They're junk. They're terrible. It doesn't matter who it is. They're just instantly wrote off forever. They're pieces of trash. Yeah. And then if somebody comes in, when Cody signed, 2 weeks before, the whole fan base, everybody, he's that stupid flippy person from AEW, blah, blah, blah. Then he's a god. It's...
You could see it really strongly with Punk because the internet hated CM Punk.
Right.
Absolutely hated CM Punk. And then he showed up in WWE and they're like, actually, the CM Punk guy's great. I'm like, wait a second. What are you basing that on? Like,
it's I don't know. It is very weird that we've all been brainwashed by Vince McMahon. And
Brett screwed Brett.
Well, is the problem AEW is having? It's just WWE doesn't suck anymore. Like, WWE was horrendously awful, and now they're not. And is it just people checked out AEW because they were like, WWE's bad? I don't want to watch it. I'm going to watch this other show. Oh, wait, WWE is good again? Okay. And they just jump back. And like, is it just that simple that, oh, WWE isn't awful, so I don't need this upstart company anymore. I can just go back to watching what I've always watched.
Do you either of you find it weird? And I'm thinking about the Monday Night Wars in this way. Like, I remember the Monday Night Wars and even ECW, right, constantly referencing the other companies
all the time. Yeah, absolutely.
And you don't get really an overt peep on Monday Night Raw about AEW. It feels like, especially since Punk left AEW, there's some mention of other companies, but for the most part, or I should say, there's some mention of the WWE, but not in the same way. And do you think that's also hurting everything too?
Yeah,
like
WWE not acknowledging everything.
WWE does it by design.
Yeah, them not acknowledging things hurts everything.
I mean, they do it on purpose because they don't want nothing else. Like I'm pretty sure that when Punk had his first match, his match in Madison Square Garden that he had recently, I'm pretty sure they announced it as like CM Punk's first match in 10 years because nothing else he did counted, right? Like that's what they do. And I don't even blame them if their goal is to like, you don't even want people to have an idea. If you're only watching WWE, you don't want anyone to even know that there's another company. Why would you?
Right. But you're also trying to portray yourself as a quote unquote sport. Like, imagine how absurd it would be if someone asked Sidney Crosby about the Flyers and he was like, I know what you're talking about. The who? You know? Like, it's I'm sorry, Paul. I didn't mean to make a Flyers joke. I totally just got that. I did not mean to make a Flyers joke.
It's all right.
But I did not mean that. Now I feel bad.
Don't feel bad, Josh. You have no reason to.
But it's weird little things like I don't know what they said about like where Cody was. Like I don't watch enough of WWE to like. I think they kind of just said like he was. And
he was a postman.
Like the CM Punk story is easy for them to explain, right? He walked out of wrestling, he didn't wrestle again. And like most people will believe that because unless you watched AEW for that 2-year period, you can believe, oh yeah, I know he left wrestling. I saw him in MMA. I saw him like he was gone. I get it. But like I don't know how they explained Cody. I think they kind of just said he went to like the independents or Japan because where else do you explain where this guy was for 10 years, right? Like
followed his lifelong dream to become a potato farmer.
Cody went back to his home planet and was never seen again.
So I came up with a couple questions that I wanted to ask you guys. Sure. First of all, is this the problem that AEW has? It's a perception problem from what I can tell because the shows are good and the roster's good. And maybe it's not perfect, but I don't think any wrestling company has ever been perfect. So I think the issue that it has is a perception problem. Is the problem the same thing that NXT kind of had, that they were great as an alternative, but now we don't need the alternative anymore? Is that it? Like, oh, they were great as an alternative to WWE, but I like Roman Reigns, so I don't need that anymore. Is that it?
I honestly, since we've started this conversation, I think that we've now just seen the absolute plateau. Like the fans that are here, like here is in the AEW side, it's all that we're going to get for now. And the fans that were here and left, that's all that's going to leave for now. I mean, of course, people are going to come and go.
That holds true basically in the ratings, right? The ratings have been very steady for a year or so. Like they're not the peaks that they were at, but like the ratings are. There's a hardcore audience of 800,000 people that are watching on TV every single week, and they're not really going anywhere.
So yeah, like I would. You could say perception problem because it's obviously a plateau. Like you're not going to change my mind because I watch it. But if I would just catch maybe one episode a month, you could say like, oh well, that must have just been a good one. Like 3 out of 4 are bad. I believe you. You know what I mean? Like if somebody.
But is it just because WWE is no longer bad? That before, if you were like, I want to watch wrestling, but I hated Raw the last time I watched it, so I'm going to check out this other company. And now you're like, I want to watch wrestling. Oh yeah, Raw seems okay. And you're just going to watch. You're not going to seek out the other company now because Raw's not terrible.
See, to me, that's like comparing apples and oranges because I don't even think WWE is a wrestling show.
They are very different.
Yeah.
So, like WWE to me is it's like a variety show.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's what it seems like to me.
It's a TV show that has a wrestling ring.
Yeah.
That's fair. I think that's totally fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so as far as like comparing them, like, oh, do I like this or do I like that? I see where people could think that way, but to me, they're two different things. So,
all right. My other two questions that I have before and then I'll stop monopolizing this conversation. I think I know what both of you will answer. Is in 2021 when they were, within range of WWE's ratings, it was a perfect storm. WWE was down, like they were getting their lowest ratings ever, and AEW was getting their highest ratings ever, and they were within 200,000 people on a good week. Will that ever happen again?
Absolutely. Like
Paul?
Yeah.
I'm cautiously optimistic. Yeah. There's going to be, it's a boom and bust cycle, right? I don't know that either company is ever going to be completely up at the same time. I think one's going to be, again, perception, right? Whether it's true or not. I think one company's always going to be up, the other's going to be down. And, Roman Reigns can't be the champion forever. Cody's going to get stale.
He can be the champion forever. You just watch. They've only got 4 more years to pass Bruno Sammartino. They can do it.
That's true.
And so I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I tell Rick this all the time. You're this close, you almost have to now, because
That's
you're
true.
never
I mean,
in
I
a
wouldn't
million
even blame
years.
them if they did. Yeah, they're because it's never going to come up again.
Yeah, like what think about it now. Like what's the reign for? What's Bruno's reign?
Like 8.5 years or something.
Yeah.
8.5. Okay, so imagine a 10-year-old gets into WWE right now, and just say Reigns beats it. They would be like, oh, I'll be 20 when there's a new champion.
Right.
Like, so yeah. But anyway, I'm sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
No, you basically said, I have nothing else to add with this one.
Oh.
But no, I think it's a boom and bust cycle, and at some point, AEW is going to get higher ratings for some reason. WWE will be stagnant, and also I think too, like a lot of WWE's like low points was residual effects of McMahon, right?
True.
And Triple H isn't going to be the golden child all the time. So yeah, I could see it. I could see it shifting.
And I'm gonna piggyback off you real quick. Do you guys think that if it does kind of follow the boom and bust cycle, do you honestly think that's better for everybody? One up, one down. Like, if you're gonna learn from your mistakes, be like, oh, okay, look where they're at right now. What do we have to do to either surpass or at least compete? And then whenever one gets back on top, oh, hey, they changed and they're doing this now. Do we need to do that?
Yeah, it would be great. It would be great if that happened, because that's what made like the wrestling in the late 90s so good, was that they could look at Nitro or look at Raw or look at ECW and go, oh, what are they doing? Oh, that looks cool. We have to do something better than that.
Well, I mean, ECW was basically the birth of the Attitude Era because Vince had money and Paul didn't.
Right.
Yes.
That was the change that put them to the next level. So
that was so blatant that even WWE will admit that, and they don't admit anything. Even will admit that they got a lot of their attitude from ECW.
Talk about being brainwashed. Like, how nuts was it when ECW showed up on Raw? Like, I remember running to the bus stop to be like, guys, did you watch that last night?
When like the real ECW showed up on Raw, not like the invasion.
Yeah,
like when actual ECW showed up on Raw.
Yeah, when Sabu jumped off the Raw side. Like, I have goosebumps right now talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, that was unheard of.
Yeah.
Are you talking about when like they would like Taz and Sabu and I think
Like
Dream.
RVD they invaded Raw
Okay.
for
Yeah.
in the lead
Yeah.
up to like their first pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And I mean that's what competition gets you, right? Like WWE was down at the time. ECW was doing well, but like needed more exposure.
Almost
WCW
like the New Japan
was crushing
deal.
both of them. So they needed each other.
Yeah.
And that's what competition gets you, right? Like
Mhm.
if there was if WCW didn't exist at that time, WWF wouldn't feel the need to put ECW stars on their show because why would they? They have no reason to do that. But because WCW was doing so well and so hot, they had to do something.
Yeah.
And that was the outcome.
I think if memory serves me correctly, like one of the first appearances of ECW was at a pay-per-view in Philly. Or
on the crowd.
Weren't they in the crowd? Like Tommy Dreamer or Sandman or someone was in the crowd? Yeah.
And then the next night they were in Hershey. I would need to like look at this again. And I was working the Hershey Park Arena, and my friends came running to the stand. I was working in food service at the Hershey Park Arena. And my friend Scott came, hey, he goes, freaking Taz is in the crowd. And I'm like, what? And I say of fake Diesel and fake Razor Ramon, if I remember correctly. So that same Monday Night Raw, pretty historic. Fake Razor Ramon, fake Diesel, and ECW.
What a time. What a time.
Awesome.
My last question, and this is a hard one I had.
Okay.
I couldn't answer it myself because it's weird. Because like both of us have said, not so much Blasco, but both of us have said that like something feels off in AEW. I think it is a perception thing. I think it's just like it's a down period. It feels weird to like have people leave AEW to go to WWE because you're not used to it. I think that's all it is. But on that note, if you could change something about AEW, you could just pick a thing and make that thing different to fix it or to make it better. What would it be? I had trouble thinking of one because like I enjoy the shows. I can't think of one thing that I'm like, oh, if that thing was just different other than Ric Flair, I would enjoy the shows more. So it's hard for me to pick a thing. Like if there's a problem, you should be able to fix it, but I can't think of what that thing is. So do either of you have a thing?
Personally, if I was Tony Khan, I would I'd set a precedent and I'd be like, all right, nobody talks to anybody as far as like the media goes, or you lean in and you work. If you want to work them and say you're signing with Blasco Wrestling, go do it. Keep them on their toes. It has to be one or the other. You can't have like just someone leaking something or someone. You either don't talk to anybody or you go all in, not blow, excuse me. You go all in and you just work everybody and let some truth out every now and again, but mainly just keep it lies and keep everybody on their toes. But I'd change that because the leaks or whoever's doing that, it makes you look unprofessional. I mean, of course, every company has leaks.
And it doesn't let stuff die. Like we're still talking about what happened with Jericho or the Bucks and Kenny Omega and Punk.
Yeah.
That was like over 2 years ago now. And like we're still talking about it. Like it doesn't let. And when you stop talking about it, Jericho tweets about his NDA to someone, and then it comes back again, right? Like it keeps going. Like we don't need to talk about this anymore. But they keep it alive.
Yeah.
And going back to this was one of the points that I was going to bring up about how we always say WWE controls the narrative. They don't need to control the narrative, but they need to. I don't want to say control what people say, but you never have to worry about like someone signed to WWE to come on and complain about anything that's borderline offensive or like a little sketchy or political or anything. Sometimes the AEW people, I understand they're real people and they have real complaints and real this and real that, but you're also representing a brand. And Jericho Jericho being accused of having people sign NDAs and all this and cheating on his wife and being in an open marriage or whatever. Like, if it's true, okay, I don't care. That doesn't affect my life. But if it's not true, don't sit on it. Like,
Yeah.
Jericho tried to fight the person, but say like, hey, you told lies about me. Like,
Yeah.
like you're
One of the problems is related to the internet, and it's like maybe they
Right.
treat them more like independent contractors than WWE does, even though they're all independent contractors. Like AEW
Right.
has given them more freedom, right? They get to work more indie shows. They get
Right.
to, have more control over their characters, what they wear, what they do. Like, are they also giving them more control over like, oh yeah, you could just WWE runs your or owns your social media accounts. Like they don't necessarily manage them for you, but they tell you what you should and shouldn't do, right? AEW kind of doesn't, and is that the problem? Like, if tomorrow Roman Reigns came out and was like, "Oh, I really hated this angle," like that would be shocking to hear that from WWE.
Right.
But
That's what I mean. They never have to worry.
It happens all the time in AEW.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, WWE doesn't have to worry about that. But then again, it's nice to have a voice, especially at work.
Right.
If
they
you
are
feel,
independent contractors, right? Like
they are,
yeah.
So maybe I'm going to eat my own words and say maybe I'll take that back, because giving them a voice is actually a very good thing.
It is a hard one for sure.
Wow. I'll just say be more careful with the brand. That's
Yes.
one thing that a person that works in WWE, that it's not the be all end all, but pretty much they're representing that brand, and they're going to do everything in their power to make that brand look good. Not that people in AEW are going to tarnish the brand, but WWE kind of teaches you how to play that game. Maybe Tony Khan needs to hire somebody to teach the staff how to play that game. We'll say that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think that might be my thing that I changed. Does Tony Khan need to hire somebody to handle this stuff? Like the stuff with the Bucks and Punk, that should have never got to the point where it got. Should they have hired someone to solve that? Should they have had a JR in 1999 who just would sit them down and go, "Hey guys, smarten up."
Well, apparently that's Danielson's job now.
Right, that makes sense.
Because he was the one that said fire Punk.
Right.
Well,
there is that rumor that he was fining people for their social media conduct, even though he's disputed that. But I think there might be something to that too.
Who, Danielson?
Yeah.
And good, as they should.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Paul, your turn.
Yeah, I think for me, and this is, I don't know, like I think part of my thing is what I want out of AEW, what I want out of a wrestling company. And, I think I like the idea, as Josh said, protecting the brand. And it doesn't have to be to the extent of WWE, but get everybody on the same page in some capacity. And part of it, I do think like understanding what's special about moments, and that's very WWE language. But if you're going to have like a high flying match, does it fit for a Wednesday night or a Friday night, or should that be a pay-per-view? Right? Like sometimes I think with AEW, like there's not. I think the wrestlers don't seem to understand like this is where the match is on the card, and there are other people working after me or before me. And I don't know if that makes sense necessarily, but
it is very true. I feel that way a lot.
Yeah, we always talk about that during pay-per-views. Like you could just look at the card and be like, oh, there's the rest match because this match is going to be a bloodbath, or there's the comedy match between these two. Like, it's a good point.
Yeah.
And like weird things, like maybe they need more road agents, or what WWE would call producers, because weird things like when they on the last pay-per-view, the stipulation for the Julia Hart Abaddon match was no biting, or biting is allowed. Right. And then didn't Mox and MJF both bite people on that same show? Like, if you're going to make a point to have a stipulation for one match that, in this one you're allowed to bite, don't have biting in two other matches, because you're undermining that first match.
Yeah, it seems very disjointed at its worst. Right.
No.
And I think too, like, this is a minor thing, but either go full kayfabe or don't go kayfabe. And I think this also goes to like the social media thing. I hate the press conferences. I don't see what the purpose of them is. And half the wrestlers are in kayfabe and others aren't. And either have wrestlers come out and talk about it. That was a great match. You know, MJF and I worked really well together. We botched the kind of spot there, but you know, I think we versus, you know,
or do it totally in character. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. And you know, like the last one with people asking Tony Khan about Jericho it was torture to watch. And actually never have Tony Khan in front of a microphone. I think that's the third just under no circumstances.
Come on, it's great.
No, not at all. Like
it's like watching a car crash.
The car crashes are funny. Yeah, that's the thing. Like they can be funny.
That's yeah, no disrespect to anybody that's ever been in a car crash. We've all been.
I apologize.
Right.
Car crashes are funny.
I never said that. Man. Never said that. You signed an NDA. You can't say anything about my car crashes.
See, this is another thing that I was thinking of, though. I definitely agree with the cohesion. I think that maybe is it. I couldn't think of what it is, but I think that might be it. That like you do see repeated spots. You do see like people stepping over each other. You see, it's a thing that it sounds dumb, but you see like, oh, the finish to this match happened twice in the same show. Like I can't think of examples, but it's happened.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's weird when that happens, and it reminds me of, I know Jericho was talking about when he talked. Oh, did you talk to Punk before All In? How was he? You know, how was he feeling? Like, was he angry? And Jericho said like, oh no, I went and talked to him because I was going to do a top rope something. I think like a Hurricanrana or something off the top rope, or a DDT or something off the top rope. I forget what it was. He said, I went and talked to him that I was going to put that spot in, and because I know that sometimes he does that in big matches. So I wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to do it because he was the opening match and my match was later. So I didn't want to like repeat the same thing that he was doing.
Yeah.
I think that's smart. And I think
that is.
Jericho knows how to do that because he's wrestled for 30 years or however long. They have people. They have, you know, Jerry Lynn and Dean Malenko and Jake Roberts working for them. Should their job be doing that stuff? Like WWE's had road agents forever, where they have, you know, they kind of tell you, oh, what are you going to do in your match? Oh yeah, don't do that because I heard that this guy's going to do that, or I'm going to tell that guy not to do it then because you're doing it. Does it just need that? Right now they do have a kind of very independent spirit of like, we're going to book our match and you're going to structure your match and you're going to structure, and they're all in little bubbles.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And Rick, me and you talked about this before. After Tully Blanchard left, he went on one of the podcasts and he was talking about, you know, all the time I was in AEW, none of the young rookies, men or women, came to ever talk to me or Arn or ask for our help or anything. And I'm thinking, all right, why did they have to approach you? I mean, you're the veteran that they're probably terrified to talk to.
Right.
And you have people like, I mean, imagine like Sky Blue or, you know, Julia Hart was 18. Is she going to walk up to Arn Anderson and go, sir, will you watch my match? Or
and
what did I do
like,
wrong?
Yeah,
come on. Like,
because there is legit, I think you mentioned it. Like those older wrestlers were jerks. Like their era was filled with jerks, right?
And everybody knows that.
So like, yeah, there's a chance that you walk up to Arn Anderson and go, hey, can you watch my match? And he goes, who the hell are you? How dare you talk? You didn't shake my hand 3 weeks ago when we were at this new venue, which is the rule that we all have to shake hands whenever we enter a new venue, and you didn't do it. And now I hate you. Right. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, like maybe, you know, Jericho and the veterans need to step up and be like, hey, we are here.
Yeah, maybe Tony Khan needs to tell them, hey, go in and talk to them. But then you end up in the same problem as like, what if they don't listen? What if I'm just going to pick 2 people off the top of my head? What if it's a Young Bucks match? Just random. Okay. I just happen to pick the Young Bucks. No bias against the Young Bucks, of course. And what if the Young Bucks are in a match and, Arn Anderson comes up to them or Tully Blanchard or someone and says, hey, maybe don't do this instead. And they go, you don't know, you only know wrestling from the 80s. You don't know wrestling from today. I'm not going to listen to you. Right. Like, how do you, someone needs to resolve those things. Someone needs to establish what the hierarchy is and say, no, if these guys are the producers, these guys are the veterans, their job is to give you feedback. You have to at least consider it. You can't just brush them off.
I agree.
Yeah.
Totally.
And that goes to the cohesion. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think we've been saying that for a long time, especially since the Punk stuff. There doesn't seem to be anybody in charge, and there doesn't seem to be anybody really working these things out. Right. And if I was a wrestler, I would be terrified to go up to Arn Anderson or Tully Blanchard and Jake the Snake Roberts.
Right.
But if they talk to me, I would listen. Right. But I think there's such an opportunity for AEW to change how wrestling is, but also you can't go too far into completely disavowing wrestling as it was. And, I think that's where we are.
I just want to mention I know it's going long. I just want to mention one thing that I just thought of that.
Okay.
We've talked a lot. Everyone's talked a lot about how everything changed when, Punk and Danielson came in. Right. Around that same time, not right after, but, 6 months after or so, I don't remember the exact timeline, Tony Khan bought ROH and started, writing ROH shows or putting together ROH shows. Is the reason that there's less cohesion backstage now, because there was at one point cohesion backstage.
Yeah.
And there's not now. And people attribute that to the WWE guys or the divide between them. Is it just Tony Khan used to be hands-on and now he's busier? He has ROH and he has Rampage and he has Collision to write, whereas before he was just writing Dynamite. He doesn't have time to go in and talk to all these people, and there's no one doing it now. Maybe he did it before and now no one is.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, he never sleeps. He couldn't.
That would be one of the changes that I would think of. Make Tony Khan sleep. Yeah, no. We just had Dynamite at Daly's place, and that was great, and it brought back all those old memories of Daly's place, which were kind of awkward because you're fondly remembering the time when you weren't legally allowed to leave your home. But it felt like there was fond memories associated with that. And do they need something like that where we're going to put everybody in a room and work it out? They had no choice but to work it out when they were in Daly's place, right? Is it that? And could ROH be that thing? I was thinking when they were Daly's place, why isn't ROH just at Daly's place? Why aren't they that? Why aren't they pandemic AEW?
They tried that at the it was studio wrestling in Orlando.
Yeah.
And for some reason they stopped it. I don't know why, but it just travels with what's it? Collision now?
Now. I feel like it would make sense to you're just going to be at Daly's place. We're going to record a bunch of we're going to make pandemic AEW in ROH and just do that and see how that works. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's off topic, but I'm just throwing that out there.
But before we go, I had one. It's a simple question for you guys. Talk about something that would be awesome. Going a little more positive here. Do you think in the year 2024 we get the blood and guts match of Copeland and Christian, FTR, the Bucks, the Hardys, the Lucha Brothers, and the Guns?
Ooh.
All related tag teams minus FTR.
I mean, the tag scene is back. That's
what I mean.
For the last little while, it felt like the tag scene was falling apart, which was kind of one of the hallmarks of AEW. So the fact that it's definitely back. I mean, you just named a bunch of teams.
That could be 3-on-3, 12 people, 2 rings in the cage.
Hmm.
I mean, I would watch it. I'd be happy to watch it.
I
take
think
my money. Yeah, I'd watch that.
Yeah, I'd watch it for sure.
And that's. I was trying to think. I was like, do I put the Guns in it or not? And I was like, no, they were tag team champions. They have to.
No, you have to put the Guns. The Guns are one of the highlights of the tag division over the last year or so. Like they're
Oh yeah, and that's what I mean. Like at first I was like, oh no, they can't be in there. I was like, wait a minute, they're former champions. They have to be in there. So yeah, I hope that happens this year. That was just something to end on.
So I think we solved AEW. I think we solved all their problems.
Yes.
Tony Khan needs to just hire us.
They do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he apparently listens to the show. He booked Griff Garrison against Adam Copeland after Rick suggested it.
Now he doesn't listen to the show, but the fact that I said, hey, why don't you have a veteran have a 10-minute match with, I don't know, Griff Garrison, and then 3 days later, Adam Copeland has a 10-minute match with Griff Garrison, where the complaint was Griff Garrison gotten too much offense. I'm sorry. There's a chance.
Yeah, he listens 100%.
So if you're listening, just hire us. We solve your problems.
And sleep more.
Yeah.
Sleep more. Yeah, you got to sleep.
And
just sleep.
I said nothing about car accidents. I said nothing about your microphone skills, Tony. So
what if you heard anything weird? It was because you haven't slept enough. You're
correct.
You're delirious.
Exactly.
Just sleep more, and then
total delirium.
Let us solve your problems. There you go.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, please be sure to like, subscribe, share at Elite City Pod, all social media. We're everywhere now. Thank you to the new subscribers. We got a couple new subs this week, so thank you and welcome. Do you guys have any parting words before we go here?
Hi, Biddy.
Hi, Biddy.
Hi, Biddy.
Hey, everybody said hi to Biddy.
She's not going to listen this far into the podcast.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah, there's no way. She has a flight. She has a flight coming up. Maybe she.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, maybe she'll listen on the plane.
Yeah. If you haven't seen Iron Claw, go check it out.
Oh yeah, you saw Iron Claw. Give us a quick review of Iron Claw.
Quick review.
It is not a film for wrestling fans. I mean that in a good way. So don't go in thinking it's going to be a lot of fan service to the Von Erichs versus the fabulous, the fight, the Freebirds,
okay,
and all these sort of things. It's more about, it's a very moving tragedy, but it's not. I think the thing I was really impressed by it wasn't like a winking, like, oh, here's this Von Erich you didn't hear about, and it works as a story of this family falling apart. It's not really a wrestling movie, but it is. But good. But really worth it. If that makes sense.
Kind of like The Wrestler.
It's
more of
not
the human
as
person.
It's not as visceral as The Wrestler. It's not as I think it does a good job of balancing between the mythologizing that takes place in wrestling and the reality. But I think The Wrestler is way more about the reality of wrestling, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. But also, like, if you know the Von Erich story, like, there's no surprises. You know what happens to Kerry, you know what happens to David, you know what happens to WCCW. But that's really fascinating. And we can, maybe another episode I can talk more about it, but it's worth watching for sure.
Okay. Well, and before we go, I also had this. We have to do an episode of just like classic wrestling, us three.
Yes.
Like we are very old, and probably nobody would listen to it, but we have to go back and I don't know, maybe just pick like 3 matches and dissect them or something. But
and we
have
kind of have like a varied experience of wrestling. I didn't watch as much like WCW or ECW as you did, but I watched a lot of WWF that you guys may not have watched. Like we have a lot of different
that'll be fun.
Experiences. Yeah.
We are old because I'm because we were talking before the show started about how now it's like my reality, like to worry about like having a heart attack shoveling snow. This is accurate.
Now think if you were twice as old and Ric Flair and wanted to wrestle a match.
I'm just gonna laugh. I'm just gonna laugh at that. I was born the year that Ric Flair was world champion. 1979.
Everyone was born the year that Ric Flair was world champion.
It's true.
Even Lincoln's like, I was around. I was.
was 3 years before my assassination.
My last words were "woo."
I just have a picture of Ric Flair like chopping Abe Lincoln in the corner. That is pretty entertaining to me.